Have you ever wondered what secrets hide behind the closed doors of those who seem to have everything? What if I told you that sometimes the most powerful people in the world are actually the most broken? And sometimes it takes someone invisible, someone whose name no one even knows, to remind them who they really are. This is the story of Emma Cole, a 23-year-old night janitor who cleaned offices when the world was asleep. She had a gift most people never noticed. She remembered exactly where everything belonged. Every pen, every paper, every forgotten memory. But on one cold Tuesday night in November, Emma would discover something that would challenge everything she thought she knew about grief, healing, and the dangerous line between helping someone and violating their most sacred space. This is a story about the things we think we've lost forever, and how sometimes the path to healing requires us to risk everything we've carefully built to protect ourselves. Emma had been cleaning the 42nd floor of the Bright Spine building for 8 months. She knew every corner, every shadow, every sound the old radiators made when the building settled for the night. Daniel Brooks, the CEO, was different from other executives. While most left their offices in chaos, his was always carefully arranged, almost obsessively so, papers stacked in perfect piles, pens lined up like soldiers, books organized by height and color. His office had one peculiarity that Emma had noticed: a small personal safe built into his desk unit. Most executives kept important documents there, but Daniel's safe had something unusual about it. Sometimes she'd find it slightly ajar, as if he'd been in such an emotional state that he'd forgotten to close it properly. That Tuesday night, something was different. When Emma approached Daniel's desk to dust the surface, she noticed his personal safe was hanging open about an inch. Inside, she could see the corner of what looked like handwritten letters tied with a blue ribbon. Emma's first instinct was to simply close the safe. It wasn't her business. It wasn't her place. But as she reached to push the door shut, a small photograph fell out and landed face up on the carpet. It showed a little girl with dark curls and dancing eyes, sitting in a library chair with a stack of children's books. Emma picked up the photograph to place it back in the safe, but as she did, she glimpsed the corner of a letter. Just 3 words were visible: "My precious daughter." Her hands began to tremble, not from curiosity, but from recognition. Because 5 years ago, Emma had written letters that began exactly the same way. Letters to someone who could never read them. Someone was writing letters to a little girl. But the careful way they were hidden, the emotional weight Emma could feel even from those 3 words, suggested something heartbreaking. Emma carefully returned the photograph and closed the safe. But sleep wouldn't come that night, because in her heart, she recognized the signs of someone carrying the same impossible weight she'd carried for 5 years. But to understand why Emma couldn't simply walk away from what she'd found, you need to know the secret that had been eating away at her since she was 18 years old. Emma hadn't always been a night janitor. 5 years ago, she'd been a promising library science student with dreams of becoming a children's librarian. She had plans, a scholarship, a future that sparkled with possibility. But life has a way of rewriting our stories when we're not looking. Her little sister Lily had been 6 years old when everything changed. Lily had been Emma's whole world, her responsibility ever since their parents died in a car accident when Emma was 16. You see, Emma and Lily weren't just sisters. They were best friends, co-conspirators, dreamers who shared a tiny apartment and an endless imagination. Emma had become both mother and sister overnight, working part-time jobs while finishing high school, determined to give Lily everything their parents would have wanted her to have. Lily had loved stories more than anything else in the world. Every night before bed, Emma would create magical tales about brave little girls who could fly on clouds made of books, who could speak to the moon, who could make flowers bloom with their laughter. "Tell me the one about the princess who lives in the library," Lily would whisper, her small hand clutching Emma's tighter in the darkness. And Emma would weave another story, watching her sister's eyes grow heavy with dreams of adventure and magic. Lily would interrupt with questions. Does the princess have a sister too? Can she teach other children how to fly? Does she ever get lonely up there in the clouds? Emma always had answers, always found ways to make the stories bigger, brighter, more magical. Because Lily's wonder was contagious, her questions like little keys that unlocked new doors in Emma's imagination. During the day, while Emma attended classes, Lily would draw pictures of the characters from their stories. Crude sketches in crayon of cloud princesses and moon talkers and flower singers. She taped them to their bedroom wall, creating what she called Emma's Story Museum. When you become a real librarian, Lily had said one morning over breakfast, you can put our stories in books and other kids can read them too. We'll be famous story sisters. Emma had laughed, ruffling Lily's sleep-messy hair. We're already famous, little bird. Famous in the best way, to each other. But one rainy October morning, everything changed. Emma had been up all night studying for midterms, surviving on coffee and determination. She overslept, rushing to get Lily ready for school, snapping at her sister for being slow with her breakfast. Hurry up, Lily. I can't be late again. Those were the last words Emma ever spoke to her sister. Not, I love you. Not, have a good day. Just impatience and frustration over things that didn't matter at all. Lily had stepped into the street while crossing to school, looking back over her shoulder, probably hoping to catch a glimpse of Emma, probably wanting to wave goodbye like she always did. She never saw the delivery truck that ran the red light. The call came during Emma's advanced cataloging class. The professor's voice seemed to come from underwater. Emma, you need to come to the hospital. There's been an accident. The doctor said Lily died instantly, that she felt no pain. But Emma felt everything. The guilt of those last sharp words. The weight of being 18 seconds too slow to save the most important person in her world. The crushing realization that all their stories, all their dreams, all their plans for the future had ended in a crosswalk on a rainy Tuesday morning. She dropped out of school that day. Couldn't bear to sit in a library surrounded by children's books. Couldn't bear to dream about the future when her heart was buried in the past. Couldn't bear to look at Lily's drawings still taped to their bedroom wall. She took the night cleaning job because it was quiet, because no one asked questions, because in the silence of empty offices, she could pretend that somewhere, somehow, Lily was still listening to her stories, still drawing pictures of cloud princesses, still believing that her big sister could make magic with nothing but words and love. And that's why, when Emma saw that photograph and those 3 words, she recognized something she'd seen in her own mirror every morning for 5 years. The face of someone still trying to love someone who could no longer love them back. The next night, Emma couldn't concentrate on her cleaning. The safe was properly closed now, but the image of that little girl's photograph haunted her thoughts. She knew she should mind her own business, knew that whatever pain Daniel Brooks was carrying wasn't her responsibility to heal. But something deeper than curiosity was pulling her, a recognition of kindred grief. As she worked, Emma found herself studying the office with new eyes. Details she'd never noticed before suddenly seemed significant. The way Daniel's desk faced the window, as if he was always looking towards something in the distance. The small stuffed elephant tucked behind his computer monitor, clearly a child's toy, worn soft from countless hugs. The way he arranged his pens in groups of 7. Emma was cleaning the hallway outside Daniel's office when she heard something that made her freeze. It was 11:15 p.m., well past when anyone should be in the building. But there was definitely a voice coming from the CEO's office. At first, she thought he must be on a conference call. But as she moved closer to continue her cleaning, she realized something strange. There was only one voice. Daniel was talking to someone, pausing as if listening to responses, but Emma could hear no other person speaking. I know you probably think Daddy is silly. Daniel's voice came through the door, thick with emotion. But I wrote you another story today, about the cloud princess we always talked about. Remember how you said she should have magic shoes that let her walk on rainbows? Emma's hand froze on her cleaning card. He was talking to someone who wasn't answering back. The doctors keep saying I need to let go, sweetheart. Dr. Martinez wants me to try something called acceptance therapy. But how do you accept that the most beautiful thing in your life is just gone? How do you stop loving someone just because they can't love you back anymore? Emma pressed her hand to her mouth, recognizing the devastating familiarity of those words. She'd had this exact conversation with Lily's photograph 1,000 times. "I miss your questions, baby girl. I miss the way you'd interrupt my stories to ask if the princess ever felt lonely. I miss how you'd steal my reading glasses and pretend to be a serious library lady. I miss everything about you so much that sometimes I forget how to breathe." Emma realized she needed to move away. This was far too private to overhear. But as she quietly pushed her car down the hall, she heard Daniel's voice one more time. "I promise I'll keep writing until I figure out how to get these stories to you, Sarah. Because a promise to your daughter is the most sacred thing in the world." Emma spent the rest of her shift in a daze. Sarah. The little girl's name was Sarah, and she was Daniel's daughter. And somehow, despite being a powerful CEO, Daniel was living in the same impossible hope that had nearly destroyed Emma. The hope that love could somehow bridge the space between life and death. The next morning, Emma made a decision that would change everything. She called in sick to her day job and spent the morning at the local library researching. What she found made her understand the full scope of Daniel's tragedy. 7 years ago, Daniel Brooks had been more than just a successful businessman. He'd been a published author, a writer of children's books that had touched millions of families around the world. His daughter Sarah had been his inspiration, his muse, his everything. The characters in his books were all based on her wild imagination and endless questions about how the world worked. But then came the accident. A drunk driver, a rainy afternoon, a 7-year-old girl who died holding the manuscript of her father's latest book, the one he'd been writing especially for her 8th birthday. After Sarah's death, Daniel had stopped writing completely, stopped creating, stopped believing that words could heal anything. Emma found old interviews where reporters asked if he would ever write again. His answer was always the same. The only stories worth telling were the ones she inspired. Without her laughter to guide me, I have nothing left to say. But now Emma understood that Daniel hadn't really stopped writing. He'd just started writing for an audience of one, an audience that lived only in his heart. And Emma knew exactly how dangerous that kind of love could become, because she'd lived it herself. The question was, what could she possibly do to help? And did she even have the right to try? That evening, Emma made a choice that would either save 2 broken people or destroy them both. She decided to come to work an hour early and try to learn more about Daniel's situation. Not to spy or violate his privacy, but to understand how serious his condition had become. But first, she needed to understand more about the man whose pain she'd accidentally witnessed. During her lunch break, she did something she'd never done before. She talked to her coworkers about Daniel Brooks. "Mr. Brooks," said Melanie Truitt, his executive assistant, when Emma asked casual questions while cleaning the main office. "He's complicated, brilliant, but haunted. He used to be so different, creative, energetic, always talking about new projects. But that was before." Melanie's voice trailed off as she glanced around to make sure they were alone. "Before his daughter died," she whispered. 7 years ago. Car accident. She was only 7 years old, same age as my own daughter is now. Mr. Brooks, he never really came back from that. The company runs itself these days. He goes through the motions, but it's like he's living underwater." Chris Ford, the content creator who often worked late, had noticed things too. "The man talks to himself," he told Emma while she emptied his wastebasket. "I hear him sometimes when I'm staying late, having full conversations with someone who isn't there. At first I thought he was on conference calls, but there's never anyone on the other line." Uncle Nolan, the security guard, had the most heartbreaking observations. During one of their brief conversations by the elevators, he shared what he'd witnessed during his years of watching over the building. "That man carries a weight that would crush most people," Nolan said in his weathered voice. "Every night, same routine. He comes in around 10:30, stays until 2 or 3 in the morning. Sometimes I check on him through the security monitors just to make sure he's safe, you understand. And I see him writing things down. Sometimes he cries. Lost my own boy in Vietnam." Nolan continued, his eyes distant. "Different kind of loss, but loss all the same. I recognize the signs. That man is drowning in his love, Miss Emma. and love that has nowhere to go. It can poison a person from the inside out. Armed with this knowledge, Emma understood that Daniel wasn't just grieving. He was trapped in a pattern that could be slowly killing him. The same pattern she'd almost lost herself to 5 years ago. That evening, she arrived at work early and positioned herself in the supply room near Daniel's office. She wasn't planning to spy. She just wanted to understand how bad his situation had become. At 10:30 p.m., Daniel arrived. Through the partially open door, Emma could see him move to his safe and carefully remove what looked like letters and a photograph. For the next hour, Emma could hear the sound of Daniel writing, occasionally interrupted by the sound of him talking softly to the photograph. She couldn't make out specific words, but the tone was heartbreaking. The voice of a father trying to maintain a relationship with someone who could no longer respond. Emma knew she was witnessing something deeply private, something that could destroy Daniel's career and reputation if it became public knowledge. But she also knew that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do for someone you care about is nothing at all. And despite having never spoken to Daniel Brooks, Emma was beginning to care about him in the way that only someone who has walked through the same darkness can understand. The next morning, Emma made a decision that would test every boundary of professional ethics, personal safety, and human compassion. Emma spent 3 days wrestling with herself. She knew that what she was considering could cost her job, her reputation, possibly even result in legal consequences. But she also knew that sometimes staying silent is its own form of cruelty. During those 3 days, Emma found herself reliving her own journey through loss. She remembered the first time she tried to pack up Lily's belongings, only to find herself sitting on the floor of their shared bedroom, clutching her sister's favorite stuffed rabbit and sobbing until she couldn't breathe. She remembered the well-meaning friends who'd said things like, "She's in a better place now," and "everything happens for a reason," words that felt like sandpaper against her raw heart. She remembered the loneliness of grief, how it separated you from everyone who hadn't walked through that particular darkness. But she also remembered something else. She remembered the moment, almost 2 years after Lily's death, when she'd been walking through a park and seen a little girl about Lily's age reading under a tree. The child had looked up and smiled at Emma. And for just a moment, Emma had felt something she'd forgotten was possible, joy without guilt. That night, she'd gone home and talked to Lily's picture about the little girl in the park. But instead of the usual one-sided conversation filled with apologies and promises, Emma had found herself saying something different. "Lily, I think maybe you would have liked that little girl. Maybe you would have been friends. And maybe part of loving you means caring about other little girls who love stories the way you did." It was the first time Emma had imagined Lily wanting anything other than for Emma to stay frozen in grief forever. It was the first time she'd considered that love might be bigger than loss. Now, looking at Daniel's situation, Emma realized she was seeing someone trapped in the same prison she'd finally learned to escape. The prison of believing that healing meant betrayal, that moving forward meant leaving someone behind. On Friday night, Emma made her decision. She would leave Daniel a note. Not advice, not interference, just acknowledgement. The kind of acknowledgement she wished someone had given her during the darkest period of her life. She wrote, "Mr. Brooks, I am Emma Cole, the night custodian who cleans your office. I owe you a sincere apology and an explanation. 2 nights ago, I accidentally discovered that your personal safe was open. I saw a photograph and the beginning of what appeared to be a personal letter. I immediately closed the safe without reading further, but I want you to know that I am aware of this privacy breach. I am writing to apologize, but also to tell you something that I hope will explain why I felt compelled to reach out rather than simply ignore what I saw. 5 years ago, I lost my 6-year-old sister Lily in a car accident. For 3 years afterward, I wrote letters to her, talked to her photograph, and lived in the hope that somehow my love could reach her wherever she was. I understand the weight you're carrying because I've carried it too. I understand the conversations with pictures because I've had them. I understand the letters that never get sent because I've written them. I'm not writing to give you advice or to suggest that I know what's best for you. I'm writing because sometimes when you're drowning in grief, It helps to know that someone else has survived the same waters. If you feel that my knowledge of your private pain makes it impossible for me to continue working here, I understand completely. But if you ever need someone who understands why love doesn't end just because life does, I'm here. With deep respect and understanding. Emma Cole. Emma placed the letter on Daniel's desk and then spent the weekend convinced she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. She'd violated his privacy, risked her job, and possibly opened wounds that were meant to stay closed. Monday morning would prove that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is exactly the thing that needs to be done. Monday morning, Emma arrived at work to find her supervisor waiting for her. "Emma," Janet said, her face grave. "Mr. Brooks wants to see you in his office." Immediately, Emma's heart sank. She'd known this was possible, but facing the reality felt like stepping off a cliff. Daniel Brooks was standing behind his desk when she entered, and his expression was unreadable. On his desk, Emma could see her letter, along with what appeared to be printouts from security footage. "Ms. Cole," Daniel said, his voice carefully controlled. "Please sit down." Emma remained standing. "Mr. Brooks, I want you to know that I understand if you need to terminate my employment. What I did was unprofessional and—" "Ms. Cole," Daniel's voice cut through her apology. "Please, sit down." Emma sat, her hands trembling. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Finally, he spoke. "I spent the weekend reviewing security footage from the past month. Do you know what I found?" Emma shook her head, afraid to speak. "I found footage of you on several occasions, stopping in front of children's book displays in our lobby, standing there for several minutes, sometimes touching the covers gently before moving on. I found footage of you pausing every time you passed a photograph of our company's charity work with the Children's Hospital." Daniel moved around his desk to sit in the chair across from Emma. "I found footage of someone who recognizes grief because she's carrying her own." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Brooks, I never meant to violate your privacy. When I saw that photograph, I recognized something in it." "What did you recognize?" "The way someone holds onto a picture when it's all they have left," Emma whispered. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer than Emma had ever heard it. "Tell me about Lily." And so Emma did. She told him about the bedtime stories, about Lily's drawings taped to their bedroom wall, about the morning when impatience became the last words she ever spoke to her sister. She told him about the 3 years of writing letters to someone who couldn't read them, about the gradual realization that love had to transform or it would destroy her. When she finished, Daniel was quiet for several minutes. "Sarah was 7 when she died," he finally said. "She was holding a manuscript of a book I was writing for her 8th birthday. A story about a princess who could fly on cloud libraries and visit children all over the world. After she died, I couldn't write anymore. Couldn't bear the thought of creating stories for other children when I couldn't finish the one for my own daughter. But I never stopped writing to her. 7 years of letters, Emma. 7 years of trying to send my love to someone who can't receive it." Emma nodded, understanding completely. "The difference between us," Daniel continued, "is that you found your way out. You learned how to let love transform instead of letting it trap you. I'm still writing letters to a ghost. But here's what I don't understand," Daniel said, his voice becoming firmer. "Why risk your job to tell me this? Why not just mind your own business?" Emma met his eyes for the first time since entering his office. "Because," she said quietly, 5 years ago, I wish someone had cared enough to risk something for me. I wish someone had seen me drowning and thrown me a rope instead of pretending everything was fine." Daniel stared at her for a long moment. Then, for the first time in their conversation, he smiled. "Ms. Cole," he said, "I think we need to have a much longer conversation." Over the next month, something unexpected happened. Daniel and Emma began to talk, not as CEO and employee, but as two people who had survived the same devastating storm and were still learning how to breathe again. Their first real conversation happened on a Thursday evening when Emma found Daniel sitting on the floor of his office, surrounded by scattered letters and crumpled papers. "I don't know how to do this," he said without looking up. I don't know how to turn 7 years of letters into something meaningful. Emma sat down on the floor beside him, something that would have been unthinkable just weeks before. Tell me about Sarah, she said simply. Not the daughter you lost, the daughter you knew. What made her laugh? And so Daniel began to share memories he'd kept locked away for 7 years. Sarah's obsession with collecting smooth stones from their backyard, convinced each one held a different magical power. The way she insisted on wearing her Halloween costume, a sparkly purple cape, to the grocery store every Tuesday because that's when the magic vegetables need protection. How she'd sneak into his office during writing sessions and draw pictures of his characters, always adding details he'd never thought of. She said the Cloud Princess needed a pet. Daniel laughed through his tears. Something that could fly with her but wasn't scary. So Sarah drew this tiny dragon, no bigger than a hummingbird, that lived in the princess's pocket and told jokes to make her laugh when she was lonely. Emma smiled. That sounds exactly like something Lily would have thought of. She always said stories were better when the characters had someone to talk to. As the weeks passed, Emma helped Daniel do something he'd never thought possible. She helped him organize his letters chronologically and thematically. With her library science background, she could see patterns in his writing that he'd been too close to notice. Look, Emma said one evening, spreading the letters across the conference table. These 12 letters from the first year, they're all about Sarah's memories. But these 15 from the second year, they're about adventures you imagined having with her. And these 23 from the past 2 years? Daniel, these are complete story arcs. Daniel stared at the arrangement in wonder. I never saw it before. Because you were writing with your heart, not your head, Emma said gently. But your heart knew exactly what story it wanted to tell. Together, they began the delicate work of weaving Daniel's letters into a cohesive narrative. Emma would type while Daniel spoke, transforming his conversations with Sarah's photograph into proper dialogue between the Cloud Princess and her tiny dragon companion. But the real breakthrough came when Daniel shared something he'd never told anyone. The night before Sarah died, he said quietly, she asked me to promise her something. She said, Daddy, when you finish my Cloud Princess story, will you read it to other kids too? Because maybe they need magic as much as I do. I never kept that promise, Daniel whispered. I was so focused on writing to her that I forgot about writing for her. Emma reached across the table and took his hand. Daniel, what if that's exactly what we're doing now? What if this book isn't just for Sarah? It's from Sarah, her gift to every child who needs to believe in magic. The transformation in Daniel was gradual but unmistakable. The man who had been writing desperate letters to a photograph began crafting deliberate stories for living children. Emma watched him come alive again as he remembered not just Sarah's absence, but her presence, her curiosity, her creativity, her absolute belief that stories could change the world. They worked together 3 evenings a week, with Emma officially granted flexible hours to assist with what Daniel called a special publishing project. Melanie noticed the change immediately. He's different, she told Emma one afternoon. For the first time in 7 years, Mr. Brooks seems present, like he's actually here with us instead of somewhere else entirely. Uncle Nolan had noticed too. That light in his office doesn't stay on until 3 anymore, he told Emma with a knowing smile. Man's learning to go home at reasonable hours. Haven't seen that since before? Well, since before. The most magical moment came when they finished compiling the first complete draft. Daniel held the bound pages, all 127 of them. And for the first time since Sarah's death, he smiled with genuine joy instead of just practiced politeness. She would have loved this, he said, not with the desperate hope of the past 7 years, but with the peaceful certainty of a father who finally understood his daughter's lasting gift to the world. 6 months later, The Cloud Princess Who Remembered How to Fly was published by Bright Spine Publishing. But more importantly, Daniel Brooks remembered something he'd forgotten in his grief, that the greatest way to honor someone you've lost is to give their love wings. The book's dedication read, For Sarah, who taught me that stories never end, they just fly to new hearts. And for Emma, who reminded me that love is not a museum to visit, but a garden to tend. Daniel established the Sarah Brooks Foundation, using proceeds from the book to provide free children's books to families who had experienced loss. And Emma found her way back to her true calling, becoming the Foundation's children's librarian, finally able to share stories again without feeling like she was betraying Lily's memory. Their first reading event was held at the children's hospital where Sarah had spent her final days. Daniel read aloud, while Emma helped distribute copies to young patients and their families. Watching children's faces light up at the Cloud Princess's adventures, both Daniel and Emma felt something they hadn't experienced in years: the pure joy of seeing love transform into something bigger than loss. Every month, Daniel and Emma visit Sarah's grave together. But now, instead of writing letters that go nowhere, Daniel reads his published stories aloud, stories that are being read by thousands of children all over the world. And sometimes, when the wind moves through the trees just right, both Daniel and Emma swear they can hear the sound of two little girls laughing with joy, finally hearing the end of the stories they'd been waiting so long to discover. Because sometimes the most profound love isn't about holding on. It's about learning how to let go and letting your love fly free to touch the lives of everyone who needs to remember that magic is real. Some stories are too beautiful to end. They just transform into something even more magnificent. And sometimes, all it takes is one person, someone brave enough to risk everything to say, "I understand," to remind us that our love is bigger than our loss, and our stories are stronger than our sorrow.